And when Zhuravka was here, I mean, without any planning, her talk was like sort of right in up that alley at the same time. This very analytical way of, watching your mind. Anyway, it was all good. So thank you.
I'm gonna start opening at 9 on Sundays. Yeah, retail meditation stuff. Maybe,
And when Zhuravka was here, I mean, without any planning, her talk was like sort of right in up that alley at the same time. This very analytical way of, watching your mind. Anyway, it was all good. So thank you. And when Zhuravka was here, I mean, without any planning, her talk was like sort of right in up that alley at the same time. This very analytical way of, watching your mind. Anyway, it was all good. So thank you.
Great if people were coming and participating. I think it's something that will organically grow as people learn that it's available. Yeah, you need to do regular reminders. Yeah, I need to make a sign to put up that says from 9 till 9:45. Silent meditation in the shrine room only, please.
Okay, I think we can start. Are you good, Dave, for starting? Okay. All right. Again, we're in Kalu Rinpoche's Profound Buddhism, the survey of Buddhism, but especially the Vajrayana. And we made it last time to page 184, but I'm going to back up one page just to have a little more smooth entry into where we left off. So this, at the bottom of page 183, the steps of purification. To purify ourselves of the karma and the 4 veils requires an extremely long time, hundreds or thousands of existences until we reach Buddhahood. However, if we become conscious of the problem and make great effort, purification can be accomplished in this present life. According to some texts, in the best of cases, 6 months would be enough to reach awakening. If not, then a year or 1 lifetime. From an immediate point of view, if we seriously take up the preliminary practices, we would first accumulate enough merit and produce a sufficient amount of purification to dissipate the veil of karma significantly. And of course, that's the outermost veil. That veil could be entirely eliminated, and the first stage of a bodhisattva called perfect joy would be attained. On the first bodhisattva stage, purification is directed to the veil of conflicting emotions, which is then suppressed totally at the 7th bodhisattva stage. This attainment corresponds in Mahamudra to the realization of the first 11 degrees of the Mahamudra path. And then from, in the Bodhisattva bhumis again, from the 8th level to the 10th stage, these are called Mahasattvas. The 3 degrees of concentration, I was going back to Mahamudra, the 3 degrees of concentration, the 3 degrees of simplicity, 3 degrees of one taste, and the inferior and mediocre degrees of non-meditation purify the veil of latent conditioning. All right. In the final superior degree of non-meditation, that's Mahamudra, the veil of ignorance is dissipated, and this is Buddhahood. So we have these 2 different structures, that exist in parallel, so to speak, with each other. And he's describing the Bodhisattva path again. This is also, given in terms of the, the 5 paths. So you have the 10 bodhisattva bhumis, the 10 levels of the bodhisattva, those are encompassed by the 5 paths. You have the first path, which is one of accumulation. And then you have the next path, which is of application. So it's like from accumulation, you're gathering merit, in a sense, building up your spiritual power. And then that power can be used on the on looking at the mind, and all the things that we do in a virtuous spiritual way. That's the path of application, sometimes called the path of joining. Then that leads to the third path, which is the path of seeing. This is where the radical insight is gained in a very deep kind of way. Then the next path, the fourth path, is the path of meditation. Yeah, it's the 4 paths, not the 5 paths, sorry. The path of meditation takes you from the second bhumi all the way up to the 10th bhumi. So that's the path, the bodhisattva path. And Mahamudra has like a different kind of conceptual structure. Talks about these different degrees. And of course, it's especially dissolving the kleshas, the afflictions, the emotionality, but then also the at the end, of course, the veil of latent conditioning, or we might say the knowledge obscurations in the bodhisattva path. So he's just doing a survey here, and this is all, obviously, each one of these things is an entire class. This progress can be made quickly by means of the Vajrayana and Mahamudra. With the method of the ordinary Mahayana, it would take an incalculable number of lives to be accomplished. What are the factors leading to the most rapid progression possible? They are a Lama with great compassion, deep instructions, and a disciple of superior capabilities. It is said that in this case, thanks to the instruction of Mahamudra, purification of the 4 veils can be immediate, like a light switched on in the darkness that is dispelled instantly. All right, qualities of a Buddha. When there are no clouds in the sky, one can be sure that it is not going to rain, snow, or hail. In the same way, when the mind is free of the 4 veils, and when its mode of being is fully actualized, the suffering and difficulties of this world are no longer experienced. One is beyond samsara. You know, our particular tradition, Jigten Sumgun being the, the outstanding example that's often referred to, he has this teaching called Gongchik, which means like one taste, I think. I'm not exactly sure. It's these pithy statements, not really organized like as a text, but they're exceptionally profound. And I've never studied it. But he's known for the oneness of the teachings. Joravka said something this weekend which pointed at that for me, because we have all these different like traditions within the tradition, such as Mahamudra, such as the 4 types of Vajrayana, such as Shamatha and Vipassana in the Sutric tradition, all of these things. And you know how we normally say, and you've heard me say a number of times, how in the Shamatha teachings, we calm the mind, and then with that calmer, seemingly more powerful mind, we're able to look into the nature of the mind. But it struck me this weekend when she was teaching that, when you calm the mind, when you're practicing shamatha, the concentration, that is actually our true nature shining too, because there's automatically, it's not 2 different things. There's automatically more clarity in your mind when it's concentrated rather than being dissipated. So, we use all these conceptual distinctions because it helps us approach the truth. It gives us encouragement to practice and to, be increasing our understanding. It's like it said, the perfection of wisdom. We're going up and up and up, you might say. But yet these teachings are not to be disparaged as lower or higher, even though we use that term, and certainly, there's a certain meaning to that, but not in the sense of value or being apart from. One is with our true nature and the other isn't. It's not that way. All right. So no clouds in the sky. There's no rain, no hail. One is beyond samsara.
You get them all yesterday.
There you go. We got lots of chance to practice on the afflictions. When Buddhahood is reached, the mind has conquered all the veils and imperfections. It says the Tibetan word is chom. I'm thinking that's the same. Chomden Day, they had this term, the Bhagavan, in Sanskrit, and supposedly it means the world honored one. I've been told. I don't know Sanskrit, but Bhagavan, world honored one. Chomden Day in Tibetan. All right. So when Buddhahood is reached, the mind has conquered all the veils and imperfections. It is endowed, den, with all qualities, and it has gone beyond. Tibetan is day, samsara. There's the Chomden Day. Conquered, endowed with all the qualities, and gone beyond. Therefore, a Buddha receives the title, oh, how Bhagavan, look at that, Frank knows something. Tibetan Chomden Day. I promise I didn't read ahead. In Tibet, the Dharma was an integral part of the civilization, and everyone accepted its propositions with absolute confidence. Because the Dharma teaches that Buddhahood implies unimaginable qualities, it was a fact accepted without discussion. Contrary to this type of faith, Westerners use their critical intelligence. Consequently, they ask questions regarding Buddhahood. Is it a simple and pure disappearance of mind, a state like the void of space, nothingness? Or could it be a state of total insensitivity as a stone or the earth on which we walk? These doubts are symptoms of misunderstanding. The infinite qualities of Buddhahood are already present in our minds. Buddhahood is not something to be created or conferred upon us by someone, or that is originating from any external source. The qualities of Buddhahood are primordially existent. Indeed, the mind is empty in essence, and this emptiness is, by definition, unlimited. We cannot say, up to this point, the mind is empty, but after that, it is no longer empty. Emptiness of mind embraces the totality of samsara and nirvana. It is omnipresent. Furthermore, we saw that the clarity and intelligence without obstruction of the mind were inherently empty. Where there is emptiness, there is also clarity. Where there is clarity, there is intelligence without obstruction.
Is that because we grew up in the Western world with a belief in a creator God? Right?
Yeah, Keen's asking, is these doubts, where do they come from? So because of the way we grew up in a Western world, with certainly the tradition of creator God, and yeah, exactly. We're conditioned,
Totally opposite.
Well, yeah, it's just that it's a non-dual teaching, and the theistic teachings are, maybe in their highest levels, they sort of touch on it, but basically they are dual teachings. There's a creator, and then there are the creatures, and really the two can't mix. They're connected in ways, of course, but it's sometimes there have been mystics who have gotten in trouble. They go from being a great practitioner of their faith to suddenly being regarded as a heretic because they're talking about, becoming God or, entering into God or whatever. So it gets kind of dangerous for those folks. But absolutely, absolutely. And it's a real question, I think, as whether a non-dual teaching like Buddhism can actually be transmitted in a culturally accepted way to a dualistic culture.
Joan of Arc she was burned at the stake for Jumping into the right energy.
Yeah, who knows? You have a lot like that for sure. And you even see it with many sort of quote unquote Buddhism in the West, where people, they just can't accept the non-dual and the vastness of this. And instead they just sort of, especially blurred over into some sort of political campaign or ecological and that, and all those things are fine, but it's not the pure Dharma teachings themselves, which embrace all of that, you might say, from the inside out. So I know it's a real challenge. It's a challenge. Based on the complete absence of limits of the mind and its ability, there are the infinite qualities of a Buddha. The first quality is omniscience. A Buddha, that is, a mind that nothing hinders, possesses a complete, clear, and precise knowledge of the past, present, and future situation of all beings in the 6 classes in samsara. This is just mind-boggling. It's just, there's just no way you can understand this conceptually. But of course, that's part of the teaching. Added to this knowledge is love, originating from the vision of suffering that imprisons beings because of their ignorance of the pure nature of their own minds. And from love comes the power to help beings and guide them. This is why Buddhas continually work for the benefit of all beings until samsara is empty. Omniscience, love, and power are the 3 fundamental qualities of Buddhahood. You sometimes see this triptych, 3 Buddhas represented like on an altar or something. And Amitabha as the omniscience, Chenresig as love, and Vajrapani as power. You often see those on a Mahayana altar, usually on like a Theravadan or someone who's emphasizing more self-liberation. You'll see the historical Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, and then Mahakashapa, which was his oldest disciple, and Ananda, who was his cousin, who was his attendant. You'll see those 3. Okay, now he's got a story for us. The Brahmin with only 7 days to live. In India, a long time ago, a Brahmin had the vision of a deity that declared, "You have only 7 days to live, and your next life looks very bad." It's called tough love. I've seen where you're going, and you don't want to go there. The poor man, frightened by the prediction of the date given for his death, did not know which way to turn for a remedy that would cause a delay. He heard people talking about the Buddha, and he told himself that perhaps a person so wise, learned, and clever could help him. He decided to visit the Buddha. The Buddha was then lecturing to a crowd of several thousands. Seeing all these people, the Brahmin despaired. With so many people here, how could he possibly talk to the Buddha and present his case? To his great astonishment, without having said anything, the Buddha suddenly called him by his name. "Brahmin, you have only 7 days to live," the Buddha told him. "Then you will be reborn 7 times as a pig, then another 7 times in a form of inferior existence, then again 7 times under another form, then 7 times as..." The Buddha enumerated thus a long series of painful rebirths in groups of 7. The man turned pale with terror. Who could save him from this dreadful prospect? Resuming his speech, the Buddha told him, "In the eastern suburbs of the city, there is a stupa that has fallen into ruins. If, animated by great faith, you restore this stupa, you will be able to lengthen the span of your life and rid yourself of the bad karma that assures you a bad existence in the future." The man had confidence in the Buddha. He repaired the stupa, which purified him and granted him a long life, and allowed him to avoid the inferior future rebirths. This is an example of the capabilities that a Buddha possesses naturally. These stories are so really inconceivable for us. Of course, for Tibetans, you get a feeling. Rinpoche will tell a story like this, and it's literally true. There's a story, for instance, of that big stupa in Kathmandu, the Bodhinath. Yeah, the one in Nepal with the eyes. People like ancient. I don't know how old it is, but there's a story of a pig that was just wandering around, living in the neighborhood, and it would scratch its back by rubbing up against that stupa. And it was born, I think, in a Deva realm because of that, just the associations. This is very hard for us to believe, but the Tantra uses substances. It uses everything that we have because it's using it from its pure vision. In other words, the most subtle form that it has, if we're going to express it in form, the first sort of iteration of Buddha nature in a form way, that's what it's working with. So it's like, genetic engineering or something, because you're going very deep, and seemingly, a little manipulation at that level, the manifestation has wonderful things on the material level. Temples and stupas. Generally, stupas, temples, and monasteries are the supports of the Buddha's activity. This is why participating in their construction, maintenance, and restoration engenders great benefits in the domain of purification and accumulation. Many of you are now offering to help in the construction of the Temple of Samye Ling, which is in Scotland. Yeah, Samye Ling, that was where Trungpa Rinpoche first was when he came west. The merits stemming from your work with a joyful heart are not limited to the present. According to the Buddha, as long as one stone of a temple or a stupa remains, the merit of those who have built it will continue to increase minute after minute, second after second. I think Gar Rinpoche giving us plans for a stupa, and the plans, and we had the ability, we had someone who was going to pay for it. We had the ability to produce that stupa, but then somehow not the karma for people to keep it together. And people don't know, if you know something like this, it's like if you know for us, the benefit of a hospital, people will put through. In fact, even in worldly ways, think of it. I sometimes think of the sort of the abuse that all our various politicians take. Because as soon as you stick your nose into the public, the public arena, you're slandered. And I mean, whether you're a good person or a bad person, it doesn't matter. You're just like chewed up all over the time. But I'm amazed at the persistence, whatever it is they're after, good, bad, medium. They have such strong aspiration for it because they recognize the benefit. Maybe it's just benefit to themselves. Who knows? Maybe it's a bigger kind of benefit. But regardless, they're willing to put up with all this kind of really slander and lies and just everything over and over and over again, or being, kind of falsely praised. I mean, the whole mess of samsara is there. And yet when it comes down to like building a stupa, you can see culturally, we have to have explained to us what is a stupa. We don't have that kind of aspiration, and we don't realize the tremendous benefit for ourselves and others. And this actually pertains to a Dharma center too. I mean, it's just such an easy way to acquire merit. It is true. The Buddha was sitting there by himself and could generate just huge amounts of merit through his pure wisdom. But for, the vast number of beings, the easiest thing is you support a Dharma center, its benefits are going to many more people than yourself. You're like multiplying what you can do. So it's really a kind of a wonderful thing. I've always been starting from my, extremely worldly point of view of things. you heard with Gar Rinpoche, in that matter, Lama Tarchin too, this tremendous, but not obsessive, but just tremendous support for a Dharma center and the importance of this work. In America, we kind of think, well, I'm going to be meditating, going to the Dharma center is like secondary. But the support that comes to other people, just some new person walks in and they see more than one person here. At the very least, it starts a questioning in the mind. And it happens that people come to we never see them again, but they have some sort of crisis in their life. And, they recall some feeling they had, even whatever, or just the possibility of just looking at the Buddha statue. So it's just extremely helpful to us because it's the merit that makes our meditation successful. I like to think of merit, it just means that when you flip the switch, the light goes on, as opposed to, like to me with my car today, you turn the key and nothing happens. Car needs more merit, or I do. All right. Minute after minute, second after second. Remember the life of Milarepa, the most famous of all the Kagyu Lamas. In the records of his life, it is not said that Milarepa accomplished hundreds of thousands of prostrations, or that he offered hundreds of thousands of mandala, or recited hundreds of thousands of mantras of Vajrasattva. To obey Marpa with great faith, he built first a house of triangular shape, then in half-moon shape, then round, destroying it each time to please Marpa, until he finally built a square house of 9 floors. Because of that, he was able to perfectly purify all negativity and accumulate enough merit to attain awakening in a single lifetime. Material contribution for the construction of a temple or a stupa is an excellent support of purification and accumulation. However, everything depends on the thought that supports this contribution. If we do it with faith, joy, and admiration for the accomplishment of building, purification and accumulation will be effective. But if we build it out of anger and discontent and frown at the effort, we would be deceiving ourselves to believe that this construction would benefit us. Now, the practice of Mahamudra. Continuing. Explanations given by the Lama on the nature of the mind and study by the disciple are necessary, but they remain on the level of intellectual understanding. This understanding is compared to a piece of fabric attached to a cloth. It is not integrated into the original garment and ends up becoming unstitched and falling apart. After having purified our faults and veils, we must supplement the understanding with a practice according to received instructions. We hold our body very straight, and we let our mind rest in itself as it is. As it is. The emptiness of our mind is marked by no limit. We cannot say emptiness reaches that point only. Like infinite space, emptiness embraces the totality of samsara and nirvana. We leave our mind unrestrained, in a state of total openness and without distraction. And then he has the class meditate a little like that. This empty mind, similar to space, is not only emptiness, it also has a limpid, that's clear, an infinitely vast clarity. The radiance of emptiness itself, the radiance of emptiness itself, what a beautiful phrase. We now remain in this clarity without distraction. Or meditation. There is intelligence without obstruction, which is aware of both emptiness and clarity. We remain in this intelligence, in this present awareness. And finally, in the infiniteness and omnipresence of this empty mind, we dwell in the inseparable union of emptiness, clarity, and intelligence. Instructions received by the disciple from the Lama first create an understanding. Then meditation opens into an experience, which, if we continue the practice, transforms into realization in a longer or a shorter time. We begin with the foundation, Mahamudra, pass by the different phases of concentration, that is simplicity, one taste, and non-meditation, and arrive at the result, Mahamudra, that is Buddhahood. So there, this little section that we've just done, gives you the method and the entire path. So like they say, it's very simple, but it's very difficult. Now, the disciples' view. Emptiness, clarity, and intelligence constitute the primordial nature of the mind and form what is called the inherent primordial awareness. The Buddha emphasized that our efforts would be in vain, searching for other methods than the techniques of purification and accumulation associated with the grace or the blessings of the Master in order to discover this primordial awareness. So it becomes very, really very simple. Given that our relationship with the Lama plays a very important role, we must, before accepting the Lama as such, carefully examine whether the teacher does or does not possess the necessary qualifications. But once we become disciples of a master, whether this teacher is an ordinary being or a Buddha, we must view the Lama as a truly present Buddha. Indeed, it is said that if we consider the Lama as a Buddha, we will receive the blessings of a Buddha. If we view the Lama as a Bodhisattva, we will receive the blessings of a Bodhisattva. If we view the teacher as a good spiritual director, we will receive the blessings of a good spiritual director. If we have no faith in the Lama, we will receive no blessings. And yet these confidence, these faith is such a critical part. And, it can be there in kind of a dormant way. You can have your whole life being dedicated to Dharma, and yet the faith can really kind of be asleep. But it's obviously not completely asleep. But the kind of blessings that he's talking about here, that's a blessing in itself, right from the get-go. It's like the Buddha said, my practice is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. So never to disparage one's faith. It comes through the practice that faith strengthens, like anything else. I often think of parents and children, mother with a child. In the beginning, there's like no experience there at all. But with time, just from the repetition and dealing with different crises and good moments and everything, interactions, one becomes naturally kind of skillful just through the doing of it. And that's the key thing here too. When we practice, we just simply practice. There's no need to be trying to make the practice do something for ourselves. We just practice honestly, sincerely, openly, right according to the text. The text is a guide. And that's the genius of it, that we just need to be doing it. We don't have to try to make it work. So that was about the disciples' view. Now, the styles of life of the master. We should not have too many preconceived ideas about the behavior of a lama. Each lama possesses some characteristics that make him or her act in a particular, sometimes disconcerting manner. Geshe Langri Tangpa, for example, appeared as an impassive man with a frozen face, even sad. One day, one of his disciples asked him, "What makes you so unhappy? You should not stay like that. Why not go for a walk or take a vacation?" "I always have in mind the suffering of the 6 classes of beings," replied Langri Tangpa. "How could I be happy?" The behavior of Padampa Sangye, an Indian master who came to Tibet, could be disconcerting. Praise written in his honor describes him as sometimes sleeping day and night. This was in fact the sign of his unbroken meditation. Sometimes he acted as a madman. This indicated that his realization was beyond convention. Now, another story. The nun who wanted a beautiful name. Drukpa Kunlek, he's a famous figure in Tibetan stories, adored jokes, jests, and good tricks. It was his way of benefiting beings. One day a nun asked him why he was so happy in all circumstances and why he was always laughing and being amused by everything. And there you go, the range of the mind, the range of the experience of human beings. So how do you reach human beings? Well, you can have a lama who's like crying for beings all the time, and that's going to be very effective for some people. And then you have one who's happy all the time. And there are other people who just couldn't accept being sad, be attracted to that. This is one of the great advantages of Tibet with its vast history too, because the many examples, many teachers and all sorts of differences. All right, so one day a nun asked Drukpa Kunlek why he was so happy in all circumstance, and why he was always laughing and being amused by everything. Suffering has entirely disappeared into great felicity, he replied. For me, there is no more suffering. I have just taken the vows, said the nun. Would you consider granting me an ordained name? Yes. What kind of name? Oh, a very beautiful name, of course. Let us see. What would you say of white, yellow, red, green Tara? I am afraid that this name does not fit me very well, answered the surprised nun. I would like a sweeter name. I see you need the name of Sugar, Honey, Molasses Tara. Perhaps it is too sweet now. A little more force will be necessary in my name. Then, if people were to call you Tiger, Leopard, Poisonous Snake Tara? No, it is not good. I need something greater. I understand very well. Sky, Space, Tara. It would be better to find something more suitable with who I am. Tara, who has the vows because she likes love but is afraid to do it, will perfectly fit you. Why not leave out that last part, says the nun. Tara, who has the vows, this will do very well. Behind the series of jokes, Drukpa Kunlek was, in fact, very skillful with the nun. He made her understand the real orientation in her life. She took the vows not to don a new appearance, but because these vows were to serve her as a support to turn away from worldly concerns and progress on the path to liberation. The nun received a teaching in perfect agreement with the Dharma. It is important not to reject or disparage the Dharma. Supposing that such attitudes suddenly occur in your mind, do not follow them. Think rather that they are definitely the result of previous negative karma. Dissipate them through serious study. Apply yourself to the 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara, that's the outer nundro, and accomplish the 4 specific preliminaries. Oh, here is a footnote. The 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara are treated in the chapter entitled such and such in this volume. Specific preliminaries are treated in the volume Secret Buddhism. Well, that footnote doesn't help us very much. All right. Apply yourself to the 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara and accomplish the 4 specific preliminaries. Practice the meditations of Shine and Laktong as much as you can after having received instructions from a lama. You will be able to progress rapidly towards Buddhahood. See if we can remember them. The 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara, the perfect recognition of the perfect human birth that we're in, qualities of that, and having this tremendous confidence in the potential that we have and the opportunity that we have. And then the teachings are on impermanence. This precious human body is not going to last. And then we think about karma, cause and effect. And then finally, the suffering of samsara. There's no ultimate satisfaction in samsara. So all that leads to the 4 preliminaries. It leads to refuge. This is what you seek: relief from suffering, taking refuge from suffering in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And you have the practices of the mandala, gaining merit, vajrasattva, purifying, guru yoga, the direct transmission, and I think it's refuge and bodhicitta, bodhicitta. Okay. All right, that finishes this chapter. And then we just have one more, which is the union of Mahamudra and Mahāti. Mahāti is Sanskrit for Dzogchen. So Ati is like the peak, and Maha, the great peak. Mahamudra and Mahāti. So we'll start there next time. Any questions or thoughts, discussions, anything, anybody tonight?
I have a question about. So the two terms in the last couple of sentences, meditations of Shinai and Langtong.
Laktong.
Yeah.
Shinai and Laktong. Shamatha and Vipassana in Sanskrit. So calming the mind meditation and special seeing is what it means. In other words, Shinai, Laktong. We mentioned last time too that it's actually one of the, the more that we progress with these practices, you see the inconceivable genius of the Vajrayana. Again, the emphasis on the deities and the on the Vajrayana is said to, because it's especially necessary in a time of great degeneracy, which ours is. So normally in a more peaceful time, and you can do it now, of course, too, we do this kind of two-step practice of practicing on concentration, calming the mind. It's said that when the mind is calm, it becomes like a lens. And of course, with a magnifying lens, showing the greater clarity, with a magnifying lens, all these disparate rays of the sun can be focused and can actually start a fire. So that is Vipassana, using that quality of the concentrated, non-distracted mind to look into the nature of the mind itself. But it's kind of a two-step process. But in the visualizations, those two things are happening at once. That's one reason it's said to be effective. Not only are we using form, although it's subtle form, but we're using form, and it's much easier to not be attached to subtle form than it is to be attached to gross forms. So one, it's already skillful. But then, in addition, we're able to use form, which is easier than just remaining in a state of non-distraction. That's hard. We have such a habit of this relationship with forms, seeking out forms, responding to forms, manipulating forms. So we're using the subtle forms, but also the shamatha and vipassana, the shinai and laktong, are fused, you might say. They're one thing instead of two. The effort that we put into the visualization, the clarity of the visualization and the construction of the mandala with our minds and ourselves as a Buddha, that is all obviously concentration. It's also very skillful because, if we are in a more distracted state, which of course we are, you can concentrate on just one aspect of the Buddha, like just the crown or just one of the deities around the mandala. And so it's so skillful in using the normal kind of fatigue and boredom that we get in meditation, staying on one object. The mind plays all sorts of tricks, and certainly Mara does a lot with boredom. But now, since the whole thing, the whole mandala and the deity are all sacred forms, you can practice on any part of it. So it helps you to deal with the boredom. But then additionally, you have the concentration that is the focus that's creating the Buddha and the mandala in the visualization. But it's the vividness that is the vipassana. So you can have this, and you have that right from the get-go, because even if it's kind of dull, there's still something there. So there's some vividness. And again, this is just qualities of the oneness, you might say, of shamatha and vipassana. But it's just extremely skillful, even though we don't necessarily, realize that when we come across these teachings. I know when before I came to the Vajrayana and Tibetans, I had read the life of Milarepa. But when it came to the practice part, I just had no clue what was going on. You're talking about Vajrasattva and mantra and just all these practices. And I had some sort of a conceit, that this was somehow something lower, because I didn't understand it had to be lower, right? I was beyond all that. I wasn't that arrogant, but at any rate, this is just very, very skillful. We have methods, we have things that we can do, and that's just so helpful. So helpful. Okay, so that's Shine and Laktong. You are welcome. Okay.
Was it Padmasambhava who taught the Tantra?
He emphasized the Tantra, yeah.
Okay, so Shakyamuni Buddha taught it first.
He taught it too,
okay,
but not extensively. And that's the explanation that's given, is because it was just a time with more merit. People had greater merit. And you can see that in the story. His first teaching, he gives the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. And then he and the 5 disciples, I don't even know if they were disciples at that point, but his former students, they meditated together. I don't know for how long. And all of them came to like arhathood, just right there on the spot. Of course, they had done a lot of practice and ascetic practices, and obviously were extremely dedicated and hardworking types, but not still. And there were all sorts of stories of people coming. People would come to the Buddha. In fact, at one point, his father, who had heard that his son had reappeared and was, begging for food in the next town over, and he was just totally grossed out by this. We are royalty, and you're begging? This is not right. So he sent one of the Buddha's cousins over there to talk sense to him, basically. And the guy was married. And the Buddha ordained him on the spot, shaved his head. You're celibate now. It's like he had that kind of power. So maybe they didn't need the Tantra. The story is of the Tantra that he taught in his lifetime. The first teaching was given to a king, a local Raja named Indra Bhuti. You sometimes see that story pop up. And Indra Bhuti apparently was on the veranda of his palace one day, and he saw it looked like red birds flying overhead. And, he never seen anything of this. And he asked his main minister, what is that? They said, oh, those are monks of the bhikshus of the great Shramanara. And he said, who? And they were talking. He said, well, I'd like to meet this guy. Okay, so they invited Buddha Shakyamuni, who came. And they were talking, and the king said, I'd like to be your student. And the Buddha said, of course, and then started to give him the vows of a monk. And he got to the sexual vows, and he said, no, stop. I can't do that. I've got obligations. I've got, traditionally they say he had a harem of 500 queens, and he was like populating the country, I guess. I don't know. So the Buddha said, well, then you can do this. And he gave the first tantric teaching, where you visualize yourself as bodhisattva and the queens as bodhisattvas, and you're practicing the pure vision. But he didn't give out much of that, I'm told. Yeah.
Is that the same interest story of interest in that?
No.
It's a different.
Yeah.
Which interest?
That was. Yeah, I don't know what Bhuti means. Indra Bhuti was the name of the king. Indra is one of the gods of ancient India. And so in the Avatamsaka Sutra, Huayan in Chinese. Flower Garland Sutra, it's called in English. We have it up there on the altar. It talks about Indra's net, one of the teachings the Buddha is giving. He's teaching to an Indian population, and Indra's net is this exposition of the nature of reality, where this vast net of threads, and they're sewn into diamonds all along the threads in each way, and so everything is reflected in each little diamond, but there's an infinite number of diamonds. So it's just this mind-boggling image, but he's trying to express the nature of the mind, that it's not just mere emptiness, and we tend to kind of think of kind of a nothingness, but instead this incredible interpenetration and the power that comes with that. So yeah.
I was just curious, when he gave that first tantric teaching, was that before the paintings, the tankas? Like, did those come after that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know for sure. It'd be a good question for Megan, or Kempo, but I think the maybe even better for Megan. The tankas, I do believe, are after. In fact, in India, I don't know. The Tibetans added things to the tradition, and they were the ones that made empowerments more public. In India, the stories you read about these great masters, and they were like practicing in the jungle alone, and someone through just karma would come across them and end up taking empowerment right there. But it was just a one-to-one, very secret, very secret. Part of that, I'm sure, is the Indian society, because it's not right for me to say it this way, but they're very puritanical. They have very strict rules, and these tantric images. A lot of the tantra is practiced in Hinduism too, but a lot of the tantric teachers have a terrible reputation in India, even if they're a good teacher, I do believe, because of just the kind of the vibe of the particular culture. Something similar happened in China, because the tantra went to China directly from India also. But it died out. The Vajrayana there survives in Japan, maybe Korea too, called Shingon in Japan. Some of the great figures of Japanese Buddhas are in Shingon. Shingon's still there. You can go to Shingon Temple's correction, and I did. But whatever the equivalent name was in China, the direct transmission to Shingon in Japan, because the founder of Shingon in Japan went to China, and his enlightenment was there, but I just can't remember what the name of it is in Chinese. But it died out. And some, John Blofeld for one, who was a Chinese scholar and a British diplomat in China and Thailand, and a practitioner, thought that as the Confucian kind of vibe in China, again, the images are just like a little bit too. So the Vajrayana came back into China through the Mongolians when they conquered then the Tibetans. The Tibetans converted the Mongolians conquered China, and then the Vajrayana came back. So you had a lot of Chinese people, as still happens to this day, seeking out Mongolian and Tibetan teachers if they're interested in the Vajrayana. There's one on the border between China and Tibet, Mount Wutaishan, five peak mountains, is said to be the home of Manjushri. So the Chinese have Putaishan, the home of Chenresig, which is an island off the coast. They have Wutaishan, which is the home of Manjushri. And then there's another one, Omeisham, and I can't remember who Omeishan is that's in Chinese. I can't remember what it is in Sanskrit, but they have another holy mountain like that. But yeah, so I think the tankas themselves certainly existed in Tibet, and I'm sure they did in Central Asia, and I would guess that they did in Nepal too, but I don't know when it started. Probably in India, but just, secret kind of thing. The Tibetans they changed it in that way. Yeah.
And who brought it to the West?
Who brought it to the West?
Yeah.
Really, the Tibetans.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. There was some, like even in the 1920s or something, people who Brits, for instance, who were in Nepal and came across it and then wrote about it. They discovered the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for instance. There was some Protestant minister, Waddell, I think it was his name, and I read the introduction to his book, and it was kind of wacko, but he had translated the text still because he learned Tibetan. And then Evans Wentz. So there's been a progression of better and better translations. But really, I'd say as far as the Tantra, probably the 1920s, it started coming to us. Yeah.
Famous
Keen.
Mongolian temple.
Wait,
It was,
hello.
no, this is Dharma. There was a famous Mongolian temple that was a Jeopardy question the other night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they had the picture of it and everything. It was
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
The Dharma comes west. Just like the moment that Lisa Simpson realized she was Buddhist. She threw open the sash of her window and shouted, "I'm Buddhist!" And all these trees, all these flock of blackbirds flew out of the trees. And their next door neighbor, who's the fundamentalist Christian, what's his name? Ned. He heard the shout, and he felt some sort of psychic vibe, and he closed all the windows, locked the door. The kids got down into the fallout shelter in the basement. So that's the Dharma coming west. Bodhisattva, Lisa Simpson.
That is the reaction that some people have when they hear the word boots.
Yes,
Run, run, run away.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So interesting.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had a friend from my college who was in my alumni club who told me I was going to hell. I said,
We're already here.
we're here.
He should have said which level.
Which level? Yeah, exactly. Which one? We got many. He was such a character because he was like a total. I mean, I think it was good for him what had happened, but he was just like very strong-willed, arrogant jerk type, And then he had a conversion, and he ended up being like fundamentalist Christian. I'm sure it was a good step in the right direction, but he couldn't give up. It allowed him to have the same kind of arrogance and feel holy about it, Thank you. Yeah.
I have another one.
Yeah.
Feeling verbose this is. Speaking of Christians and just like communicating with them, it's really difficult. Like I have some good friends who are Christian, and it's like, how can we bridge this gap? Oh, and my question, is it wrong for Buddhists to almost consider yourself Christian also, like in a certain way?
Mhm.
Like, because now that I have the Dharma in my life, I suddenly have this devotion to Christ
Uh-huh.
and an understanding of the Bible that
Yeah.
before I had the Dharma,
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah.
So I find myself wondering, like, is there anything in the Dharma that says that's wrong? Because I know, like,
No.
when you're Christian, you can't really be Buddhist too.
Right. Because the Dharma is just dealing with reality, the mind as it is. It can take infinite forms. We don't even know who are bodhisattvas. The ones who are sometimes are running around with Tibetan shirts on, the ones you want to be away from. But conversely, yeah.
The best book I ever read that addresses your question is Living Buddha, Living Christ by Thich Nhat Hanh. If you have any curiosity at all, get that book. It will put it all in perspective for you. It's great.
You can also read some of the lives of the great Christian saints. G.K. Chesterton wrote a biography of Francis of Assisi, and he also wrote one of Thomas Aquinas. And the thing that's kind of tricky for us these days is that you don't really know what it means when someone says they're Christian. I mean, they have.
Sometimes it's a political affiliation.
Mhm. Yeah.
rather than a spiritual one.
Absolutely. Or sometimes it's just sort of trying to spiritualize their own kind of attachments, you know. Call it Christian, you can't be criticized. I mean, I notice watching TV, there's some guy now that has ads coming on every once in a while who's one of these fellow who believes in the rapture. And so he's got this, he's talking to, you know, in some fancy California-like church. And he's got the title doctor, and he has a nifty little video that shows how the rapture is going to happen when Jesus takes all his true believers. And, you know, they have like a UPS man walking away. You see him through a Ring camera. He's walking away, and all of a sudden he just disappears, and his keys are left there. And people are in line in a movie, and some people disappear, and one who's left freaking out. And he's talking about, you know, billions of people are going to be up in the sky. I thought to myself, are there really billions of Christians? I mean, is it based on just calling yourself that? Or is there any kind of internal, just thinking about his belief. So there are a lot of Christians who think that that's heresy, that that's not really Christianity. So you have such a wide range of Christianity that I don't even know, you know, these days you don't even know what you're talking about, really. It's only the Dharma that pulls Christianity together. But don't tell anyone I said that.
That documentary we watched was that Thomas Merton.
Yeah.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, we'll have to get that again, Keen. Thank you. Keen's remembering this movie we saw on Thomas Merton. And of course, you know, he had, I believe, a realization experience at the Buddha figures in, I can't pronounce it, but in Sri Lanka. And he was very moved. His Asian journal is a wonderful thing to read because he ran into these Tibetans and he was just, especially Chato Rinpoche, His Holiness Dalai Lama, he was just very impressed. He said, there isn't anyone in the world that has surpassed the Tibetans in their meditation and realizations. So that's, you know, that was a guy who was into Zen and obviously serious Christian. He's a Trappist. But I know, and that's a wonderful benefit, isn't it? Because instead of feeling some sort of natural kind of alienation and somehow these people are on the other side of something, some wall that we make, instead you feel close. But of course it's tricky. You can't always talk, you know.
I had experienced a lot of difficulty in this journey.
Yeah, you know, and that's hard too, because even if you try to express ways that you admire and are similar, it becomes kind of like, well, why don't you become one of us then, and exclusively us? You know, I mean, it's a trap. Samsara is a trap, and it's not a sectarian thing at all. It's just realizing the nature of the mind. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tonight. We dedicate the merit from this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May we lead each and every one of them to realization, further to Buddhahood, and may all beings be happy. Swaha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.